Chronic spontaneous urticaria, or chronic hives with no known cause. It's so unpredictable. It's like playing pinball. Itchy, red bumps start on my arm, then my back. Sometimes my legs. Hives come out of nowhere. And it comes and goes. But I just found out about a treatment option at treatmyhives.com. Take that, chronic hives. Learn more at treatmyhives.com.
At Blinds.com, it's not just about window treatments. It's about you, your style, your space, your way. Whether you DIY or want the pros to handle it all, you'll have the confidence of knowing it's done right. From free expert design help to our 100% satisfaction guarantee, everything we do is made to fit your life and your windows. Because at Blinds.com, the only thing we treat better than windows is you. Black Friday deals are going on all month long. Save up to 45% off site-wide plus an additional 10% off every order right now at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions apply.
Unfiltered discussions, unexpected guests. No topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the human condition, personal anxieties, and so much more. The only talk show of its kind in the world. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Hello and welcome in. I don't speak German. We got a lot of great guests tonight to kick off the week, and here's what you'll learn on tonight's program. If you put on a virtual reality headset and grab a box in the VR world, your brain hesitates. There's nothing there. But grab a real one, feel it in your hands, and everything clicks. The missing sense of touch changes everything. In 10 minutes' time, a new study that shows why touch is the key to lifelike VR and better prosthetics. Which is to say that haptics, or lifelike touch feedback, may be the key to designing prosthetics that feel real. After that, a study into mothers who take leave when they have a kid, maternity leave. Most mothers think they'll return to work quickly, but in practice, they return a lot longer than they originally thought. Details of the study and the reasons for it halfway through the hour. That is some of what we'll cover on tonight's show. There will be more, but for now, let's dive in.
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
And in a dramatic turn on the raging debate into how many eggs a chicken can lay, we go to an incident in Port St. Lucie, Florida. And we go to our foreign correspondent, Tony Five, who reports live from the scene of his apartment in London, England. Tony, welcome to the show.
David, my favorite place in the world, Florida, hits the news again with the most insane, unbelievable titles, my friend. Yep, Port St. Lucie in Florida. Again, I believe every place there is made up, but a man, 45-year-old guy, they started an argument in a pub about how many eggs a chicken can lay, David. Do you know?
I don't, and I wouldn't even try to guess because I know discussions about how many eggs a chicken can lay, based on this story, can end in violence. And so this guy, enraged over, I guess, a disagreement. The police actually didn't report how many eggs each arguing party.
I think they don't want to start controversy, David. They could be copycat killers around here, or copycat shooters. But basically, this guy just he pulled out a 45mm Glock handgun, which isn't a small gun by any account, and he started shooting. He shot 4 shots. People ran away. Luckily, no one was hurt or killed, which is why we can talk about it lightheartedly. But what an insane reason to be arrested, arguing over how many eggs a chicken can lay. And if anybody sees the video, this guy looks like a typical hillbilly Joe. You kind of want to call him grandpa. He's got a funny little hat on. He's got a long beard. I just don't understand Florida. I will never understand Florida.
I feel like you and I need to go to Florida someday with a documentary crew and film a short called Tony Understands Florida. But yeah, this guy, he looks like, I don't know, he's wearing a straw hat, like jean overalls, but they're little shorty pant ones.
Yep. We call them dungarees in the UK. What do you call them there?
I don't know. Jean overall, shorty panties. I don't know what you call them. He's wearing like sandals and he's carrying a gun and he's... Yeah. I don't know where he fired, but he was really angry. He felt he knew the correct answer of eggs that a chicken lays versus the person he threatened. Thankfully, no one hurt. But other individuals were arrested along with this guy for, quote, obstructing. So maybe they were on his side? Like, I don't...
Perhaps. To be fair, the article does say that he had been smoking marijuana. He was agitated. He was a little bit paranoid. But he genuinely believed that people will try to con him, basically lie to him. But how would you prove such a thing? How would you prove that a chicken lays X amount of eggs?
Instead of going to get your gun if you're infuriated by someone getting the number wrong, why don't you just go back to your farm, grab a chicken, and bring it to the bar? And then no arrests happen, and you can prove your point.
Or go to Wikipedia, right? Or Google. You don't even have to go anywhere.
Oh, yeah. Couldn't you just ask ChatGPT what is the average number of eggs a chicken lays?
I like the way you, as a tech guy, the first thing you thought of was go back to a farm and grab a chicken. Fantastic. What a way to win an argument. Right, I'm going back to my farm, guys. I'll be back in a bit.
I'm just suggesting alternatives that you could bring to an argument about the number of eggs that a chicken lays that wouldn't end up in gunfire and an arrest. And I'm thinking either a chicken or a smartphone. Those are two great things to bring.
It does lead me to think, what is the worst ridiculous arguments people have got into over facts that has ended in violence? I do think I've been in pubs like my whole life in security, and the amount of things people will argue about when they're inebriated is ridiculous. It is unbelievable. Like, I've had somebody that really genuinely believed doner kebabs, which I don't know whether you have in the US.
Yeah, we have kebabs.
Like shawarma, doner kebab.
We call them kebabs, not kebabs, but same difference.
And one person believed that they were recycled elephant legs.
Oh.
And would have died on the cross believing that. Absolutely convinced.
So they thought that like layered meat thing that spins around, it's just like layered cuts of meat that cook.
Correct.
Was an elephant foot?
Were elephants' legs.
Wow.
And that's why you never really heard about elephants getting older or dying, because people somewhere cut them off and created elephant leg doner kebab. And the doner stood for donor, as in the elephants were donors.
Oh, I see. So, and rather than that argument ending in gunfire, he could have brought an elephant to the bar or a smartphone.
He could have gone to Africa, asked an elephant, and brought it back, by your logic, yes.
All right, Tony, you are coming to New York and then Canada. We're going to Toronto and the greater Toronto area in about a week now. What do you want to do let's start with Canada. What do you plan on doing in Toronto other than just hanging out with me and stuff?
Well, I'm not going to be hanging out with you, number one, so
Rude.
that's great.
Rude.
So I'll be coming over to Toronto. If there's anybody in Toronto that would like to meet, I would more than happily love to meet you.
Oh, God.
I am going to be seeing the famous sites. I'm going to see the Knicks Stadium.
You're going to see the Seattle Space Needle, the famous
the Barrier
needle,
Reef, the Great Barrier Reef of
Yep.
Toronto. I believe you have a great knitting convention. I think it's called the Needle Tower, the CN Needle Tower or something like that.
Oh, yeah, that's the Space Needle. No, it's the CN Tower.
Yeah.
Okay, I feel like you haven't been to Canada, my native country, in many, many years. Like, you haven't been there for 15 or 20 years.
Oh, yeah, so longer than that. 20 years. I went when it was safe to walk around and to get on flights and stuff. It was years and years ago, 20-something years ago. I spent time in Toronto itself. I enjoyed it. I loved it. I loved the people. I remember saying to you recently, I want to go out for a Canadian meal, and you said there is no such thing.
Well, there is. You're going to get me in trouble. I just mean, like, it's usually, like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of what a Canadian restaurant is. Every restaurant in Canada is Canadian and has Canadian influence. But it's not like, I don't know, it's not like Italian restaurants here.
Okay. Well, you always tell me off because my palate is very, very weak. Well, it's the palate of a 5-year-old, which is true, it is. And I kind of like Italian, Chinese. If anybody's got any suggestions for me where to eat, somewhere reasonable, I'd like to go and find it out.
Yeah, email Tony. His email address is tony@lastshow.pizza. That's .pizza, not .com. Suggestions where to go if you want to meet up with him, although I don't recommend you're opening yourself up.
Why not, dear boy? You should.
Tony@lastshow.pizza. We'll have to get you poutine. I mean, and then maybe Tim Hortons.
Isn't he the president of Russia?
No, that's something slightly different. One is a man, the other is French fries, cheese curds, and gravy, and it's delicious.
Okay. Not unlike the Russian president.
No, yeah, he's mostly made of French fries, cheese curds, and gravy.
Yep.
All right, so, and then you're coming here for Thanksgiving. I just finalized the menu. We're gonna make a like a roast, like a rib roast.
Breaking news! This is the first time hearing of it.
And we're gonna have subprime rib.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, so very subprime. No, I'm trying to haggle with my butcher because a prime rib to feed like 12 people is not cheap.
No.
So I'm trying to haggle with her. I think she's going to give me a deal.
Good. So, no, sounds great. I'm looking forward to it, my friend.
All right, Tony5 in Canada. You got suggestions or want to meet up with him? Tony, I'm worried about you. Email him at tony@lastshow.pizza. That's not tony@lastshow.pizza. Tony is at tony@lastshow.pizza. I hope that was clear.
Clear as mud, my friend. Clear as mud.
Foreign correspondent Tony5, thanks for being here.
Bye-bye.
Coming up next, new research on touch feedback as it comes to virtual reality. How to make objects in a VR world feel real to your mind. Sounds cool, but it's got even cooler implications, like how to design prosthetic limbs that feel real to the people that have them. Details in a minute.
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
In the 70s, 4 young women were found dead. For nearly 50 years, their cases went cold. I'm Nancy Hixt, a senior crime reporter for Global News. In the season finale of Crime Beat, I share how investigators uncovered shocking evidence of a serial killer and hear exclusive interviews with the killer's family. Listen to the full season of Crime Beat early and ad-free on Amazon Music by asking Alexa to play the podcast Crime Beat.
Broadcasting from the intersection of chaos and more chaos. The Last Show with David Cooper.
All right, let's jump into the strange world where feeling is believing. Because when you lose your sense of touch, it can scramble your brain, your movements, even your confidence. What am I talking about? Well, there is new research that could pave the way to making prosthetic limbs feel more real and even virtual reality feel more real with touch. Let's dig into how with Craig Chapman, a professor of kinesiology and neuroscience at the University of Alberta, who's worked on this. Craig, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Let's start with a definition. Haptic feedback. When I bought my new phone, I saw the word haptics advertised. I didn't know what it meant. What is haptic feedback, and why is it important to the brain, like trusting touch?
Good question. So the reason we don't just say touch feedback is because actually there's a lot more going on than just the sense of touch. So for example, if I had you hold your arm out and you could feel that your arm was heavy, that's not anything touching it, but you still know something about where your arm is. You know the temperature of something. Sometimes you feel pain. So haptic feedback is a sort of umbrella term for all of those different ways that we know about where our body is in space and what our body is touching. And obviously, that's a big source of information for a lot of what we do in the world.
So how do you design an experiment that turns on and turns off this sense to test, things about it? It seems almost, sci-fi to me.
Yeah, well, that was actually the big challenge. And just sort of rewind a little bit, we've learned a lot about the brain by turning on and off the sense of vision, which is actually pretty easy. We can just close our eyes and we can turn off the lights. But like you just said, doing the same thing for the sense of touch is pretty much impossible. And I don't want to say we've accomplished it exactly, but what we managed to do is use the massive improvements in virtual reality and hand tracking to create a scenario where sometimes when you reached out to touch an object or lift it off the ground, it really was there. But sometimes when you reached your hand out to grab that object, there was no object there. So that's how we turned it off and on. Sometimes there's a real thing, sometimes there's nothing. And then we looked at how your behavior changed across those two different conditions.
I'm imagining myself with a VR headset, picking up an apple on a table and feeling like a simulated version of it, and then doing it exactly again and not. That must have been quite disoriented for participants.
Yeah, it really, really was. And actually, the first time you do this experiment, I'll sort of never forget. The first time I put a VR headset on and we were doing the real hand tracking, most of the time in virtual reality, you don't expect to feel real things, right? It's like, it looks like it's real, but there's nothing out there. But the first time we did it where my hand got to this projected, it was a box of Kraft Dinner. You can tell I'm in Canada. There's a box of Kraft Dinner, and that my hand actually hit the box. It was really unnerving. It was like, whoa, this is not how it usually feels. And so we felt like we were onto something if we could get it just right, that people sometimes could pick up that box of Kraft Dinner and sometimes it really wasn't there. We'd be able to sort of see some really interesting new behaviors.
I'm Canadian, but I live in the US, so I'm bilingual. I also know what mac and cheese is. What happened when somebody picked it up and it was there and not? Like, what were some of the things that people reported? What did you find out?
So the number one thing we were interested in measuring was a thing called eye-hand coordination. So we look at when you look at an object versus when you reach out and grab that object. And so typically what happens in the real world is, like, if you were in your kitchen and there's a mug, you'd look at the mug for about a half a second before your hand got to pick up the mug. And then let's say you were putting that mug and you're going to move it across the tabletop. You'd almost immediately after you picked up the mug, you'd look ahead to where you were going to go next. And so that's what we observed. That's what we observe in the real world. When we put you in virtual reality, everything slows down a little bit. People aren't quite as confident. But when there's a real box there, you pretty much do the same thing. You look at the box, your hand gets to the box. As soon as your hand gets to the box and really touches it, you look ahead to where you're going to put it down. And the really interesting thing, and the thing we were most excited to prove, is what happens when there's not a real box there. So you still look at it and your hand still gets there, but because you don't feel anything, your eyes stay locked at that position. It's like you can't look ahead anymore because you don't have any other piece of information to tell you, hey, you grabbed the box. There's no haptic feedback. So in the absence of haptic feedback, your eye has to do all of the work. And as a result, you can't look ahead. And, this has some sort of knock-on consequences for the behaviors down the line. But that's the big thing. When you don't get that sense of touch, your eyes have to do the job.
Interesting. So it's almost like the feedback we get from touching an object, it tells our eyes, hey, you can go on to the next thing. But if that feedback isn't there, our eyes kind of get stuck.
Yeah, exactly. And you used the word confidence before, and I think that's a really good word. It's touch feedback or haptic feedback gives us the confidence to start looking ahead and getting ready for the next thing.
Can you break down this idea of embodiment? What exactly does this mean? I want to get to a conversation where we explore the implications with prosthetic limbs here.
Yeah, so I should have said the other thing we were really interested in measuring was embodiment. But embodiment is a really tough concept to figure out. And so scientifically, we sort of broken it down into three different parts. Sort of, do you own a thing? Do you control a thing? We use a word called agency to describe that. And is the thing in the right place or where you expect it to be? And if all of those things line up, we say you've embodied the object. Now, for our own bodies, that makes sense. I think I own it. I'm in control of moving it. It's usually where I expect it to be. But it starts to get fuzzy when we talk about things like a hammer, right? So I'm holding a hammer. I feel like I own it. I feel like if someone touched the hammer, I'd get some, sensory information from that. And I still feel like it's in the right place. And so we say that you can embody a tool. And that's very much what we think is happening with both prosthetic limbs and virtual reality avatars. They are in the right place. They respond the right way to our control. And they mostly give us the right feedback. Although, of course, we would argue there's not typically great haptic feedback. And so then you get this sort of missing link. The thing that's missing for embodiment in virtual reality is really what we were testing, is the lack of touch feedback. And that's where we wanted to go with this study.
Now, there are those who have prosthetics who say that the limb doesn't quite feel like it's theirs. How might your research or how might technology based on your research change that for someone who has, say, a prosthetic hand?
Yeah, so really great question. So we are living actually in a world kind of like science fiction. If you're a Star Wars fan, you'll know that Luke Skywalker had a limb that he could control, and it looked like it was perfect. And so we actually now are in an era where we can kind of at least engineer what looks like a Luke hand. It can do all of the things that Luke Skywalker's hand can do. It can move in all sorts of fancy ways. And the person is starting, or a user of that limb is starting to be able to control it. So actually we can implant electrodes in your brain, or we can implant electrodes in your spinal cord or different, parts of your nervous system, and you can control that limb. But the missing piece is still, what's really hard is to give the feedback, to return the feedback. So if I push your Luke hand with a pin, do you feel that pin and how do you respond? And so I don't necessarily know if this work tells us how to answer that question, but I think what this work does is tells us how to measure that question. And so what we're really excited about is by using eye-hand coordination, we can actually provide what we'd say is an objective, like number-based measurement of whether or not someone is really embodying a device. So going back to our earlier conversation, we can really measure this ability to look ahead to the next thing as the key indicator of whether or not you've embodied that device.
So let me paraphrase this. If there is some future technology that has a prosthetic, maybe a hand, that gives touch feedback to the user, one way you'll know that you've succeeded is based on measuring their sight. They touch the thing, they feel the thing with these haptic sensors, whatever future sensors exist, and they immediately look away. Then you'll know you'll have succeeded.
Yeah, that's exactly what we hope. We think this research really lays the groundwork for how to measure embodiment in a way that will be not just limited to asking the person, hey, how did this feel? But actually getting a measurement of the experience of embodiment that now we can quantify and say, hey, this is better, this device is working better for you, and is hopefully generating a good experience for the user.
Craig, this has been a pleasure. Thank you for breaking down your research for me. I appreciate you being on the show.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Craig Chapman is a professor of kinesiology and neuroscience at the University of Alberta. Up next, why so many mothers think they'll return to work fast after maternity leave, but why reality then slows them down. There's a gap between expectations and real life with this topic, and we'll cover it in a moment.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Exploring both interstellar and interpersonal space-time continuums. The Last Show with David Cooper.
I want to look at a new study out of Denmark that finds a curious mismatch. Expectant mothers who take leave, who leave work for maternity, think they'll return to their work quickly. But after 9 months after the birth, the reality tells a very different story. I'm here with someone who worked on that study. He's an economics professor at the University of Copenhagen. His name is Søren Leth-Petersen. Søren, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, David, and thanks for having me.
Of course, what drew you and your team to looking at how expectant mothers think about returning to work and then actually doing so?
So we're actually working on a broader program about how to measure expectations, because that's a difficult task. And we were drawn to this topic because there's a huge literature about how women, they suffer an earnings and employment penalty from having children. That means that they end up working less afterwards. And, one of the things that's been debated is whether it's because they actually don't have the right, aligned expectations about what's going to happen. And maybe they make wrong decisions before having children because they don't have the right expectations.
Interesting. So walk me through the study. You studied mothers in Denmark, in the Danish context. What did you end up finding?
So let me just perhaps just talk briefly about why the Danish context is interesting.
Please do.
So in Denmark, there is a really family-friendly environment. So there's a lot of parental leave. Parents, they have in total 52 weeks of parental leave that is, fully funded. And they are protected by law in terms of coming back to their work. And it's sort of agreed upon, everyone accepts the system, so it's not a problem for anyone. There's also universal daycare, which is very cheap, heavily subsidized, and of high quality. So there's really, there are lots of barriers, but there are minimal barriers in Denmark for returning to work compared to many other countries. And so we thought this was interesting because then you can get a sort of a clean expression of whether, what matters for expectations and not, internally in the couple and people's own minds, rather than because it's being because of expensive childcare or lack of job protection. So what we did was to pick a random sample of 11,000 Danish women in 2019. Then we interviewed them online on their expectations about work after having a potential child in the future. So we asked them specifically, so imagine you have a child, what do you expect is the likelihood that you would work 12 months before having the child, 3 months after, 9 months after, 18 months after, and 36 months after?
What did people end up saying?
Yeah, so they end up saying that they expect to return to work quite soon after work, so sort of between 9 and 18 months after. And they certainly expected to be fully back around 36 months after childbirth. But then we've been waiting. So this happened in 2019. So we've been waiting patiently to collect realizations, so actual work decisions for these women and the subset who had children. We didn't know who would have children afterwards, but the subset who ended up having children. And that information is available in public administrative registries because employers, they have to report to the tax authorities who work and how much they work on a monthly basis. So we could link this information to the beliefs that these women, they expressed to us. And what we found was that women, they actually, in the long run, have accurate expectations. So they do return to work as they expected, but they return later than they expected. And interestingly, it's kind of the 9 months mark is a critical point where if they wanted to share some of their leave with their partner, they would return around that time.
So why is 9 months such a dramatic turning point in your data?
So it's around that time, and the reason that's interesting is because that's roughly where they would return to work if their partner steps in and take an extended leave. And the system is such that 20 some months are reserved to the mother, and then there's around 32 months that can be shared between the two parents. But it turns out mothers, they take most of the leave in practice. So what we also did was to ask the women whether they expected their partner to take at least 2 months of leave and be engaged in childcare. And it turns out that their beliefs about whether their partner would take leave actually, is, not very accurate.
Interesting.
So it seems like that, at least at the point where we asked them, they didn't have a very clear idea about what was actually going to happen in terms of the division of parental leave between them and their partner. And it's kind of interesting because even when we zoomed in on pregnant women, then for whom this decision is very imminent, then also they are very misaligned. Their beliefs about whether the partner would take leave is actually also very misaligned. So it seems like they just genuinely haven't got this figured out at that point. So that's sort of the basic findings.
So I'm hearing some interesting stuff here. Like, for example, this prediction of how the future is going to play out is a little bit misaligned. There's a misalignment between pregnant women and their partners and who's going to care for the kid. If this happens in such a child-friendly environment like Denmark, I know you didn't study the US, Canada, North America, but what can we say about environments that don't have as kind of positive parental leave as Denmark?
I think so. The unifying thing about the Danish system is that everyone knows the system, and since all the support and the childcare is universal, it's like you would expect beliefs to be most aligned in a country like Denmark. But so what I would expect would be the case in a country like the US or Canada would be that, these beliefs, they are much more misaligned there. Because they don't have, so many peers they can look at and sort of base their expectations formation on. So I would expect women to be much more uncertain about what's going to happen in the US or Canada.
What do you think some of the factors are in Denmark, cultural, workplace, policy, that lead to this, lack of connection?
So, this is a completely open area of research because actually we don't know a lot about that. One thing that recently happened was that actually some of the parental leave months, they were reserved for men. And now some of my colleagues are studying exactly how that impacts people's norms. So some of it could be related to the fact that the norm is that, the woman should stay at home and the husband should go to work. And maybe those norms, maybe the pattern would change if those norm changes too. But it could also be because, this misalignment between the mother's beliefs about their partner's leave behavior, maybe that could also be because, women who get children, they just change their mind, between forming the expectation and then actually having the child and realizing how the situation is like.
Most parents do say that having a kid changes everything.
Yeah, certainly. and most of us who have children knows that it's a complete chaos once the child arrives, and while being wonderful too. So it's not implausible that people's ideas about what's right and wrong changes underway, but we really don't know that.
Is there anything more we can say about how we imagine how parenthood will unfold versus how it actually unfolds?
So one thing that we found out was that while it's kind of compelling that they have beliefs about whether the partner will take leave that are not super aligned with reality, what we can see is that actually what matters most, irrespectively of what the partner does, is that the women have biased beliefs about their own willingness to return, irrespectively of whether the partner takes leave or not. So it seems like that could indicate that it's the mother herself that actually changes ideas about what's going to happen.
Søren, I appreciate you coming on and talking about your research. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Søren Leth-Petersen is an economics professor at the University of Copenhagen. Coming up, when do mosquitoes decide when you're their next meal? Dawn, dusk, when you least expect. In a few moments, we're talking the secret of internal clocks that make these tiny predators so effective. We'll answer the question, could messing with mosquito timekeeping actually stop the bites? With genes and DNA.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Broadcasting from the neutral zone, where every perspective gets diplomatic immunity. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
The strange, wild world of mosquitoes, why they hunt at dawn and dusk, and whether rewiring their internal clocks could finally stop those bites that drive us mad. But how will we do it, and why will we do it? We're here with people who've researched this. They're from the Department of Biological Sciences at Columbia University. I'm here with Dr. Laura Duvall. Laura, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
And of course, here with Linhan Dong. Linhan, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us.
All right. For someone who has never thought or studied about mosquito behavior before, what does it mean when your research says a mosquito has this internal clock?
So we've known for a pretty long time that we tend to get bitten at a certain time of day. For me personally, when I walk my dog around dawn and dusk, right, I get bitten by mosquitoes from the lawn around my campus. But what we are actually interested in is there like a mosquito component to this rhythm? So we kind of hypothesize that there might be differences in basically how they're sensing us and how they're biting it at different times of day.
Interesting. So, and those times of day you found is dawn and dusk. I think anecdotally we all know that if we've ever been into the wilderness or whatever. What's happening inside their bodies that turns them into predators at these times?
So what we know is that mosquitoes are actually responding to certain host cues differently at different times of day. So they're using a lot of cues to find us and bite us. Carbon dioxide is the one that we focused on in this study, but they're also attracted to the way that you smell, your body temperature. And so what we were able to do was basically videotape mosquitoes at different times of day when we gave them different cues that humans were potentially nearby. And what we saw is that there were differences not only in whether or not they responded to those cues, but also how persistently they responded. So what we found is that if you give them a little pulse of carbon dioxide at dawn or dusk, this drives like more than 10 minutes of flight activity. That means that, if they get just a hint that you are nearby, that's 10 minutes of attempting to hunt you and bite you.
Interesting. So all I have to do is shower a lot so I don't smell and not breathe out carbon dioxide, which I think is very easy for humans to do. And then mosquitoes won't be able to find us.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. But that's not exactly your research. So how would we tweak a mosquito or alter it in a way that it wouldn't respond to these cues?
So one of the things that this data suggests is that there are times of day when mosquitoes are really good at finding us and biting us. They're really sensitive to the cues that we put out. They're responding really persistently to those cues. But you can think of the opposite side of the coin. This also means that there are times of day when they are not very good at finding us or not very persistent in hunting us. And so one of the things that we'd like to do in the future is figure out if there are ways that we can sort of lock mosquitoes into that state when she's not very good at biting humans.
Interesting. Are you planning on like altering their genes or mutating them to do it? I mean, this is kind of cool stuff.
So actually, in our study that we just published, we kind of attempted at that for a little bit because, as you mentioned, these mosquitoes have their own internal clocks, right? So we actually targeted one gene using a CRISPR-Cas genome editing system to basically knock this gene out so that the mosquito clock is now desynchronized. So now these mosquitoes have a kind of messed up system of a clock. So what we found with this is that once we treat this one component of the whole clock system, these mosquitoes are actually less efficient at biting, but only in the morning. So the true dawn and dusk peak of biting, we're able to change this one gene to suppress their efficiency at biting in the morning.
Linhan, you just like casually said, we'll edit one gene using CRISPR, no problem. Can you say more about that? I mean, that is a complicated, amazing thing. How does that all work?
So we know from other species that like there are certain genes that are important for this maintaining of this clock. And we kind of took some inspiration from a typical neuroscience species, Drosophila melanogaster. This is just fruit fly. And we kind of know from them that there's this one specific molecule that is very important to synchronizing the clock. And by saying we're doing genome editing, we're actually injecting the mosquito embryo with a specific mix of enzymes and targets to only target this one gene specifically to make sure it's not functional anymore in our mutants.
And so you tried it. You had this modified mosquito. How did it end up behaving?
So as I said, these mosquitoes, after they have the desynchronized clock, they are kind of messed up, but only in the morning. So this means that they're less active in the morning, but they're just as active in the evening. They're less efficient at biting in the morning, but they're equally efficient at biting in the evening.
So why would we want to do this? What would be the end result? How would this help humanity if mosquitoes bit less during certain times?
Well, so one thing that's useful for us to know in the first place is when mosquitoes are normally active. This is something that you could use today for strategies that people are already using to try and control mosquitoes. So for example, if you know they're particularly actively biting at dawn and at dusk, you can apply mosquito control at those times of day. One of the other things that we've been interested in looking at is when they might be performing other behaviors as well. So things like egg laying. So if you know that mosquitoes are doing these things at particular times of day, this means that you can more strategically use the tools that you already have to control or to limit mosquito populations.
And the goal here is to stop disease spread, right?
So I would say the goal is to stop disease spread, but we're also what I think of as a basic discovery science lab. And so one of the main goals in our research group is to make new discoveries about how mosquitoes are regulating this attraction to find and bite humans.
Are there any ethical considerations when you're modifying, DNA of mosquitoes in the lab like this?
So one thing I should say is that all of the mosquito mutants that we have made are generally worse at life than their wild type or control counterparts. But these are mosquitoes. These would not be released into the wild. We keep them under careful lock and key in our laboratory. But as John sort of alluded to, or Linhan alluded to before, this is something that is really new. Making these mutant mosquitoes is something that you really couldn't do more than 10 years ago. So a lot of the things that we learned about biological clocks came from what you might think of as traditional lab animals like fruit flies or mice. But thanks to this sort of CRISPR-Cas9 revolution, we can now actually directly mutate these things in mosquitoes, in the animals that are actually finding and biting humans, instead of trying to model it in a different species.
Well, I could see this being really useful, given that climate change is expanding mosquito habitats and disease risks are growing. Do you see a future where modified mosquitoes are released using technology or research similar to yours to try to curb disease spread and population growth?
So in some cases, that's already been happening. So mostly not to look at their daily biting patterns, mostly to try and disrupt mating behavior.
Sterilizing them.
Exactly, to sterilize them. But one thing that I also want to point out is that we did our research in one species of mosquitoes, Aedes aegypti. So the reason that we chose this species is that this is really the global bad girl of pathogen transmission. But she doesn't live in places like New York City, where we are. But there are closely related species that can transmit many of the same diseases. that may also be kind of sharing the same tools to regulate their attraction to find and bite humans as well. So we think that the findings that we've made in this one species may also be true in a lot of other mosquito species that are really heavily invasive and really spreading diseases to places of the world that they weren't normally found before.
Well, I'm here with researchers from the Department of Biological Sciences at Columbia University, Linhan Dong and Dr. Laura Duvall. Laura, thank you for joining me. I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your research.
Thank you so much.
And Linhan, thank you for joining me as well.
Thank you, Duke.
Of course. Listener, did you know The Last Show is available as a podcast? You just got to head to www.lastshow.pizza, our website. That's .pizza, not .com. And there you can find out details of the podcast, though I'm sure if you put David Cooper Last Show in your favorite podcast app, like Apple or Spotify, will pop up and you can catch parts of the show you missed, entire episodes, or even some bonus podcast-only content you won't hear on the radio program. So subscribe to our podcast. Coming up next, 13 brand new funguses just appeared. I mean, they always existed, but were just discovered in Alberta, Canada. 13. After the break, we ask, what else is growing out there? And should we be worried? Probably we won't ask that. But 13 new funguses, what are they in a minute?
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Taste the forbidden fruit of knowledge. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Let us dive headfirst into the wild world of newly discovered funguses. Yes, brand new life forms hiding, never before cataloged in Alberta, Canada's forests. Things are about to get unexpectedly spore-tacular as we talk about this discovery. I'm here with lichenologist and lecturer at the University of Alberta, Diane Haughland. Diane, welcome to the show.
Thanks, David. Lovely to chat with you.
Will you excuse my terrible joke? I had to spore-tacular.
I might steal it, actually, David. I might use it.
You may.
It's good. Thank you.
Paint us a picture here in lay terms. What is a calicoid? How do I say that word?
Ooh, that's an ugly word, isn't it? Calicoid.
Calicoid. That's what I said.
Yeah.
I don't know why anyone said any different. All right. Tell us about this new fungus or lichen fungus and 13 different kinds you discovered. Why might someone walking through Alberta's forest not even realize they're there? Because they haven't until now.
Right. Well, first of all, I'll give you a much more friendly name. You can call them just stubble fungi.
Done.
And the name is like super evocative because if you shave in the morning and then you shave 24 hours later, the length of your beard is about how high the stubble fungi are. So
it's fuzz, really.
Yeah, it's fuzz. It looks like the tree has sprouted a 5 o'clock shadow if you look very, very closely. So this is why people don't see them, right? Because they're super, super tiny. And they were also discovered as part of this enormous province-wide biodiversity monitoring program where we send people all over the province. Every 20 by 20 kilometers, we stick a point and we send a person there. And that means we go to places that the average lichenologist or mycologist does not go to, including, like a farmer's backyard or a downtown city park. And sometimes that leads to really cool discoveries, as this paper shows, where we have 13 new species and 3 new genera to science.
New genera to science. What does that mean in lay terms? That's like a whole new category.
Yeah, it is. That's a really great way of putting it. It is a whole new category. So the species is like human, like Homo sapien, and then our genus would be Homo. So when you discover a new genus, it means you think you've discovered something that's a new lineage, or it's kind of distantly related to other things that have already been described. It is a human construct, though, like all of science. So it's like, this is our hypothesis. We think these are unrelated, and all the data that we have suggests they're unrelated. So here, world, take these data and see if you can find them and what you make of them.
Well, let's make of them, if that makes any sense, and it probably doesn't.
Sure.
Tell me about your favorite one that you've discovered. Or that was discovered.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah. My favorite one is the one that annoyed me the most because it is probably one of the tiniest. It's only about 0.2 of a millimeter tall. And it was the first hint that we had undescribed species in the province. And it happened a long time ago. And they're so darn tiny that if you lose track of it under the microscope, it can take you a minute to find it again, even when you're looking through a high-powered microscope. And they grow on rose, which is such an Alberta substrate, right? Like wild rose is our flower. And no species had ever been discovered on rose before. So it was like a long, twisting road to figure out where this thing grew and what it was and who it was or was not related to. And then when you look at it super close under a scanning electron microscope, it has the added fun of looking kind of like a sandworm.
Oh.
It's just totally wild. It has this little narrow head with a mouth-like opening at the top where the spores are released. And it's just totally cool and gnarly, and it grows right in our parks in downtown Edmonton.
Maybe distantly related to the sandworm in Dune, the documentary Dune.
Very, very way back. Yeah.
You mentioned that it was hard to locate under the microscope, and when it goes away, you got to spend a minute finding it again. Were there challenges in finding this stuff, like while you were collecting the samples?
So many challenges. I mean, the average person, probably the extent of their taxonomic experience is like taking one of these field guides, right? If you're a real nature nerd, then you buy a plant guide or you buy an insect guide, and you're looking at big things that a lot of people have known about and have named for sometimes hundreds of years. But when you're a working taxonomist and you get something and you don't think it has a name, that's the start of kind of an odyssey. I would say that's when you pack your like taxonomic backpack and you go, okay, I'm going to compile all of these different kinds of data. I'm going to look at the morphology of it. I'm going to squash it. I'm going to subject it to concentrated acids. I'm going to shoot electrons at it. I'm going to sequence the DNA and send it all around the world. I'm going to read Russian literature. I'm going to read literature from the 1800s. These are all the steps along the journey to figuring out that it's a new species. So it takes a lot of time, and it's like a really difficult puzzle in some ways. You don't really know what you have until you get enough pieces to kind of get a sense of what the overall picture is.
When you come out the other end, do you get to name the thing? And if so, what is that process like?
Oh, it's really fun, actually. It really, it took me a long time to feel comfortable saying that I was a taxonomist and a lichenologist, and it felt like it was a rite of passage, actually, to be able to give something a name. And I feel really strongly when you name something that it should reflect something about the organism.
It shouldn't be like a gag or a humor name.
No. And naming things after people has become quite fraught as well, as we know. Like, there have been species in the past named after people like Hitler. So we try not to name things after people anymore. But naming things is really fun, and you have to kind of delve into the fun world of Latin. And it turns out my first kick at this can was not so successful. There's an official registry to send your Latin names into. And it came back and they're like, well, your Latin was not quite on par. So here are some suggested changes to your new name. So yeah, naming things is fun. And you try to think like, okay, how would I say a rose-dwelling pin in Latin? And you kind of play around with these ideas using things like just Google Translate, and then you consult the experts in Latin, and eventually you come to what we have, which is fun names that pass the scientific bar.
And what was the rose-dwelling fungus? What was the final Latin name for it?
So the final Latin name is Brevicalicium roseum.
Love it.
Which basically means like short calicium that is dwelling on rose. Any
other species you want to tell me about of these 13 that were discovered?
Oh, I mean, they're all so lovable in their own delightful ways. We have some species where we collected multiple samples right across the province for the better part of a decade. And it didn't make sense until all those different pieces came together, the genetics, the molecular work, and, getting permission to go back to people's land to kind of recollect it and figure out more about the substrate. And that led to a whole new genus, the Pericalicium. So I am pretty excited about that because we've got basically a whole new group of related species that so far are only known from Alberta. Another one of my favorites is just a one of. It's a single sample from a foothills forest, and they are the wildest little stalks you'll ever see. they actually create a spore mass and they kind of evert it. As the thing matures, the spore mass is pushed out of the top, and it kind of looks like, imagine like the ash growing on a cigarette if you don't tap it off. That's what that little spore mass looks like. And they shimmer when you shoot polarized light at them. So they're really beautiful, and they're white, which is also unusual, which gave them their new genus name, which is Albocalecium.
Oh, well, this is amazing. I know I told you at the commercial break before we were talking, I wouldn't ask the question, why should the average person be excited about it? But why should we? I mean, I am excited. Is it just that it's so cool that we're still discovering new species?
I think it is. I mean, if you're a taxonomist, it's not surprising that, especially as we go down in organismal size, that there's a lot left to be discovered. What I really love about this is how many of these species occur just in an Edmontonian backyard. You can literally go to Elk Island or down to Bona Vista Park in the city, and if you look at a rose bush and you know what you're looking for, there's a good chance you'll find a new species to science.
All right, I know you're a lichenologist and not a mycologist, but is it funguses or fungi? Which one is it?
I think it's fungi or fungi, depending on how you like your G's. Yeah.
Fungus is frowned upon.
Funguses, yes, I think funguses is frowned upon. You might get snickered at the mycological conference.
I plan to go next year.
We would welcome you, David.
Well, thank you. I'm here with lichenologist and lecturer at the University of Alberta, Diane Haughland. Diane, I have enjoyed this chat. Thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure.
Coming up after the break, a content warning for sensitive listeners or parents with small children. There is a new study that reveals how college and university women now face sharply higher risks of sexual violence than their non-student peers. A researcher behind the data will be joining us to see what's driving this alarming shift and why over the last 10 years, things have gotten worse. Details in a minute.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Please be advised that the following program contains audio content that may be graphic and potentially triggering for some listeners. This content may include descriptions or sounds that some may find disturbing. Listener discretion is strongly advised. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
We are joined by someone whose recent study uncovers a significant increase in sexual violence risk for college women. We are going to discuss these findings and the potential drivers and what it all means for campus security. I'm here with criminal justice and criminology professor at Washington State University, Amelie Pedneault. Amelie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So let's go over what motivated this study, and then we'll get to why some of the findings are so surprising. So what was the area you looked into?
So we wanted to see how the risk of victimization of women that attended campus, that attended, university compared to the risk of women the same age that did not attend college. And we also wanted to see if residing on campus changed anything in that understanding of risk.
I think naively we would think of college campuses or university campuses as being a safe place, places where a lot of information about keeping people safe from sexual violence is disseminated. When you actually looked into it, what did you find?
Yeah, so those results were a little bit surprising, right? But we found that starting in 2015, women that were aged 18 to 24 that were enrolled in college, their risk of sexual victimization went up 74% compared to women who were not enrolled in college. And if we accounted on top of this for residing on college, the victimization risk tripled.
That is not a great finding to hear about. Can you walk us through the National Crime Victimization Survey, what it captures, and how it helps us understand these trends?
Yeah, so it's one of the largest governmental crime surveys administered in the United States. And basically, our study encompassed about 61,000 women over a 15-year period. So what we're getting here, though, is a very representative sample from the United States, right? Outside of the typical, more elite, very research with big athletic programs, universities that we had before. So those findings are representative for all women in the United States attending college.
So let's go through it. There's a dramatic shift that begins around 2015, as I understand it. Can you say more about that?
So, yeah, as we were kind of talking about why this risk has gone up, right? So the first thing that come to mind was the campus anti-rape movement. So at the start of the 2010s in the United States, there was a lot of student activism with regards to making campus safer. And it kind of culminated in 2014 with an Obama-era Dear Colleague letter that really shifted the landscape and that institutionalized some of the prevention and responses to sexual violence on college.
Interesting. And then what happened around 2015 that had the risk shift?
Yeah, so that's a great question. That's also a question that's tough to answer, I will say. All of those things that I'm about to talk about, we hypothesize that they were happening, but we don't know from the data that we analyze, right? So the first one is that it might be part of a backlash effect, right? So this idea that as progress happens and as women gain more visibility and power, there is a reaction in the form of sexual violence. Another thing that we speculated on was this rise of online misogyny and hostility towards women. And we know that college-age men specifically are part of that target audience. And that, that messaging targets college-educated women specifically for what they represent. And finally, if you would allow me for maybe a third thing.
Sure.
There are certain aspects of campus life, specifically residential campus life, that makes this a risky environment as well. So we're talking about the hookup culture, unsupervised social time with lots of alcohol often, and generally people being in close proximity with one another.
Now, the numbers, 1 in 100 on-campus women reported sexual violence every 6 months. This is alarming. What does this tell us about the scale of the problem?
I think because our results are nationally representative, it is alarming, right? So if you think of lining up 100 college women, that means one of them will be a victim in the next 6 months.
Are there particular moments in the college experience, such as like the first semester, social transitions, that first year in a residence hall, that seem to intensify this risk?
Yes, so some of the literature on this talks about what they call the red zone. And the red zone is not even that first year, right? The first few months on a college campus where suddenly women and men are not living with their parents and they don't have strong friendship ties yet. And in order to kind of participate in that social life, they need to go to a lot of parties with alcohol flowing. In the US, the age at which you can legally drink is higher. So that means they cannot go to bars, right? They have to go to these places where alcohol will be given to them in order to make friends, but there is no supervision in place.
So like first year, younger years in university at higher risk. You did mention something about online misogynistic spaces influencing culture. Like, can you say more about that? How are digital subcultures that are toxic, that have misogyny in them, influencing attitudes or behaviors on campus?
Well, and again, we cannot directly speak to this, but there's a lot of kind of talking points from the online manosphere discourse that would target this. For example, this notion of gynocentrism, right? So they would see Title IX offices, which are about gender discrimination, as being a kind of a proof of the bias towards women that exists in college context. They also this notion of a blue pill, right, where the mainstream gender equality discourse, they see college campuses are being kind of one of the biggest mechanisms by which we promote gender equality and things like this.
Now, beyond campus policies and prevention programs, like what do we know about the motivations or the pathways of individuals who commit violence in these environments? Is it other students? Is it who's kind of behind it?
We don't have a ton of information about this because they rarely end up in the criminal justice system, right? So when I do interview with convicted men for sexual crimes, none of them committed their crimes on college campuses. And that's definitely an area that we should kind of strive forwards to examine more, is who are those perpetrators and how are they functioning in those campus environments in a way that makes their opportunity for committing sex crimes, like how are they mentally processing the campus environment to see opportunities and decide to act upon those opportunities.
Amelie, at the commercial break, you and I were talking. I'm Canadian, you're Canadian. We're both living in the U.S. Is there any extension of this research that you could use to say things about campuses beyond the United States?
So not directly, right? And there are obviously factors that are different between the US and Canada. So, for example, I think Canada in general is more pro-feminism than the US. The medical system in terms of treatment for victims is also different. Generally, higher education is much more expensive in the US, so there's like a prime. However, that being said, there are also kind of things that makes them similar, right? And I think the manosphere knows no border, if I would say so myself. And I do think college-age men in Canada are also vulnerable to hearing that messaging as well.
Do you have any suggestions for how universities should approach this safety issue in a way that preserves like positive aspects of campus life?
Well, we think they need to take a kind of a close and hard look at where exactly on college campuses that sexual violence happens, right? And there's a range of measures from criminology that are called situational crime prevention, in which by really examining when and where and how and by whom those offenses are committed, we can get a better sense of what would be effective in preventing those measures. Yeah.
Great. Well, I appreciate you navigating this tough topic with me and sharing some of your research and opinions on the matter. Amelie, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
Amelie Pedneault is a criminal justice and criminology professor at Washington State University. All right, after the break, we've all been there. You've sent the wrong email, you've frozen horror, and then you've wondered if this is the moment your career bursts into flames. But what if that mistake isn't the end? Maybe even the beginning of something better. In a few moments' time, workplace gaffes. They may actually help you grow, and there are ways to deal with them. So here's a question. What might your biggest workplace screw-up be trying to teach you? We'll answer that in a moment. And also tell you how to deal with sending that email in case you did. You really shouldn't have, though.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Your above-average intelligence brought you here. It deserves above-average absurdity. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
The chaos of a workplace screw-up, a workplace gaffe. Have you made an embarrassing mistake in front of a coworker? Have you had a heart-stopping moment where you hit send, you freeze in terror, and you wonder if you just ended your career? Well, spoiler, you'll probably survive. Let's discuss that with workplace psychology professor Craig Jackson at Birmingham City University. Craig, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
It's such a fun topic to write, to research, to look into workplace screw-ups. What got you so interested in this particular area of where we all work?
Well, I'm one of those psychologists who find workplaces and the work we do absolutely fascinating. From the quality of your life through to the diseases or injuries or illnesses you develop through the work you do, right through until your longevity. And some of the aspects of workplace psychology involve everyday aspects such as the mistakes and what we call cock-ups in the UK, or the screw-ups we make. Most of us have probably sent the wrong email to the wrong person at the wrong time. That's something everybody can relate to.
Guilty as charged.
Absolutely. We've all done it. But the sleepless nights it causes and the anxiety it causes can be disproportionate. And what I think this reflects is that certainly in the UK, and I'm pretty sure around other parts of the globe, is that workplaces feel more adverse than ever before. And that many, many workers are operating on this level of anxiety where they are constantly worried that one mistake will end their career, one bad error, which they weren't intending to do, could finish their job. And it's this high anxiety I find quite fascinating in workplaces, particularly among younger workers and those who've got less security and safety in their careers. So younger workers, I find, particularly worry and suffer from this quite a lot.
So what are some classic workplace gaffes that you see people spiral about? You mentioned sending the email to the wrong person or putting the wrong word in the email or something like that. Are there others that are more extreme?
Well, the wrong email can be a big problem, of course, if it's got big connotations. So leaking information an outside agency or a competing body, or what we often have, of course, is accidental data leakage. So you may send personal details inadvertently to the wrong people, and then in the UK we have to have the Data Commission getting involved. So there can be sizable repercussions even for innocent email mistakes. I think one of the biggest gaffes people make is just being wrong. And years ago, being wrong was not a bad thing. But sometimes in companies where there's lots of groupthink and lots of consistency or the desire to be consistent, sometimes when people stand up and get things wrong and they're in the minority, they often think that that can be a career-ending moment. It never used to be, and it shouldn't be. I think one of the biggest gaffes, though, that people can make is gossiping. And negative gossip,
yes,
particularly if you're saying something bad about the boss or about a client, often finds its way into the wrong ears. So gossiping is not just a gaffe, it's a bad choice, it's a bad judgment, but that seems to be quite a common one. And is usually dealt with kind of informally with written or verbal warnings, but gossiping, like other gaffes, shouldn't be the end of your career. And if anything, they can be a learning moment for you to turn things around.
Yeah, negative gossip, at best, I guess it might bond you with the individual people you conduct the negative gossip with. There might be some social benefits, they're minor, but at worst, if it gets overheard or sent to the wrong person or gets repeated, like you're not in a good place. How do you deal with these gaffes? Like, what do you recommend to people who's on the other end of just they've committed one, they're spiraling, they're worried that tomorrow they'll have no job, even though it may be relatively minor?
Well, firstly, it's temporary. It's not going to last forever. Whatever the repercussions, whether they're serious or semi-serious or overlooked, whatever, it will not last forever. It's just a temporary thing. Secondly, I think it's about how you deal with it. Firstly, you've got to own it, admit that you've made a mistake, admit that the screw-up was yours, and then deal with it, own it. And some people will turn this into a positive aspect about their career. I know people who've gone on to better jobs and promotions, and they've used their screw-up as an anecdote in a job interview about how they learn to do things better, or that they're open to learning from their own mistakes. And many people do turn screw-ups into a positive characteristic and a line on their CV that they can use to go to the next level of their careers. But what's really, really bad, I think, is when people start to blow it out of proportion. They avoid work, they may take time off sick, they may just go AWOL from work because they're dreading the consequences. And very rarely are the consequences as bad as people think they will be.
I'm struck by what you're saying about using a negative anecdote or a negative gaffe. I guess all gaffes are negative, but in a job interview at a later date, because I once did that. I wasn't really interested in the job, and I admitted to something really kind of bad that I did early in my career, and I talked about how much I regretted it and how I, had to look at myself in the mirror the next day because I conducted myself in the office in a way that may have led to someone being fired and this, that, and the other. And I was like, I don't like what this says about my character, and I'm very committed to not letting it happen again. I don't know why I told this interviewer the honest truth about what my biggest regret in the workplace was. But after I told it to him, he had this huge smile on his face. I ended up getting a job offer, and I'm like, what is happening? I just admitted to this horrible gaffe. And so there is a certain power of using like negativity in your past and what you learn from it to make you look good in the future. So that's interesting, and I was struck by it. All right, let's keep moving with this conversation, though. Shame and embarrassment. How do we deal with that? How do we deal with the shame of just committing a workplace gaffe?
Well, shame is a very powerful emotion, and we don't really think about it until it happens to us and we feel embarrassed or mortified. And shame can have a really strong motivating effect on how people respond to what they've done. I think people have to try and get over the shame and admit it was just an error. Whatever the magnitude or the type of the error was, try and get away from the shame, admit it and own it and move on. Companies and corporations these days have changed their values massively from, say, 20 years ago. Given the corporate responsibility that companies have, they want to look good. They want to value truth and honesty. And I think that having the ability to admit you've made mistakes, admit that you're human, and show you have the potential to learn and move on is really good currency. And the example you just gave in your interview, it's a good characteristic to have as an employee. It shows that you can reflect and think and change your behavior. So really try and take the shame out of it and just acknowledge that it was a screw up. You are human. And in workplaces, people are allowed to make mistakes. Obviously not too many, but mistakes are allowed.
I also like what you wrote about how doing nothing is a valid option. I think we're all very quick after we make a mistake, after we send that wrong email, to just rush to an immediate fix. And sometimes that can make things even worse. Just taking a pause, taking a beat, and sometimes doing nothing can be a valid option, can't it?
David, you're absolutely right. And this is something that I have to struggle against, because if I've made a mistake, I've sent the wrong thing to somebody, obviously I follow it up with an email saying that wasn't for you, please forgive me. But then I think the instinct is to rush and correct it and rectify our mistake. But what I've certainly learned from my experience and from studying others in workplace gaffes is that there is no rush. Just take your time, think about it. Think about what will be the best response to give or the best way to move forward, and not immediately rushing into, genuflecting, groveling and offering your resignation because of this terrible mistake. Watchful waiting is the best description I give. Just watch and wait and see how people do react. Many people will not react as badly as we anticipate they will. Ergo, you don't need to then grovel and offer your resignation. So sleep on it. Take your time. At the end of the day, it is only work.
I am here with workplace psychology professor at Birmingham City University, Craig Jackson. When we come back, the hype, weighted blankets. They're expensive. People say that they work, they help you psychologically, but what does the evidence actually support? That is what we'll cover after the break.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. The last show with David Cooper. Procrastinate your life away with us.
Weighted blankets. Are they miracle sleep tech or just pricey, fake, overbearing hugs masquerading as blankets? There is science behind them, but there's also a lot of hype, and we're going to discuss them here with Professor Craig Jackson, who works in workplace psychology at Birmingham City University. Craig, welcome back to the show.
Hi, David. Thank you.
We were talking about workplace gaffes before the break. Now we're going to talk about weighted blankets. You have this wide research interest. I guess I have to ask the next question. Why the interest in weighted blankets?
The world of work is pervasive. You spend 1/3 of your life asleep, 1/3 of your life awake, and 1/3 of your life working, pretty much. It's got a big influence, and unfortunately a lot of people worry about their work and causes them stress that they take home with them, and more we're seeing low-level anxiety, or the worried well, where people are functioning in society, they have jobs and relationships and lives, but the stress of their jobs and worries of their occupations keeps them awake at night. And if you don't get your good 8 hours of Z's, you're not going to be great the next day, and there are health impacts. So getting workers healthy, happy, and sleeping well, what we call sleep hygiene, is good for the company, good for the customers, and great for the workers. Everybody wins from sleeping.
I love how you just connected those two, but gadgets and things to help us sleep better, whether it's the latest app on your phone, the irony of using a phone in your bed to help you sleep with the blue light is not lost on me, to weighted blankets. They've become popular. We actually bought one a few years ago. I just don't like it. We don't use it. It was a waste of money. What do they seek to help people with, weighted blankets?
Well, there's a little bit of a mystery with weighted blankets, but generally the idea is that it emulates the psychological effects of touch. We know through research and studies that we respond well when we are touched, or when we are stroked, or when we are cuddled, or when we're hugged generally. And this goes right back to childhood. But having a heavy weighted blanket, which is made of heavy material or has plastic or glass or metal beads within it to really weigh the blanket down, the idea is that when you're underneath a weighted blanket, it presses down and puts force on the body, and that's very similar to the feelings of being cosseted or cuddled, either as a baby or as an adult, and it helps to soothe us and relax us, which then, in theory, makes sleep more natural to follow.
This idea of deep pressure stimulation, is there more to that, or is it what you just said?
We don't really know, to be absolutely honest. We know it works, and we know that deep pressure stimulation is associated with longer sleep, falling asleep more quickly, and better quality sleep. But neuropsychologically speaking, we don't know exactly what it does in the brain to make those things happen. We just know it works.
Could it be a placebo effect? And side note, placebo effects are great if they're cheap and they work and they don't hurt anyone, because the end effect is you feel better.
And some researchers indeed showed that a weighted blanket can be as effective as an ordinary blanket if the sleeper is told it's a weighted blanket. So we know there is a placebo effect, but you're absolutely right. Placebo is harmless as long as people know it's a placebo in the end. And some researchers have done really good stuff looking at that. One area I find absolutely fascinating is shift workers. We know that people who work shifts or night shifts, and generally who are awake when their body wants to be asleep, and then who try to sleep during their day when their body and the world is telling them to be awake, we know that weighted blankets can be really helpful in getting these workers to sleep quickly and giving them longer sleep and quality sleep. So there's lots of research to be done in people who work antisocial hours to see if blankets might be really useful. Nurses, for example, who work night shifts, and healthcare workers who work night shifts, they often get a 20-minute break during their night shift. And research has shown that a short nap between 12 and 15 minutes can really energize night workers and help to get them through the rest of the shift. So using a weighted blanket to get to sleep more quickly could be really beneficial for hundreds of thousands of workers who work night shifts around the globe.
I already do the earplugs, the sleep mask. If I do the weighted blanket, I'm just going to be in like a cocoon. Maybe I'll never emerge.
And Freud would say that's what sleep is. Freud would say good sleep is being in a cocoon, being in a chrysalis, and you emerge the next day as a refreshed butterfly. Whatever works for you, it's worth giving a go. All I would say is, do you really need the expensive equipment? Do you really need to pay $60 for a weighted blanket when an ordinary blanket tucked up really tight might do the same job? As with everything, there's always companies out there trying to sell us this gadget and this kit for a marked up inflated price. And again, it's how it isn't how you sell the steak, it's how you sell the sizzle. And a lot of these sleeping gadgets, there's all sizzle and no steak.
So what I'm hearing is they may work, the evidence is kind of spotty, it may have a placebo effect, but there's also this marketing hype that we also don't want to be falling into. But
yeah,
it's kind of contradictory, right? Like if they kind of do work, maybe the marketing hype is worth it. I don't know.
Well, having reviewed the evidence, the best thing I can tell you is that lots of companies are getting into the weighted blanket game, and lots of celebrities. So there's something there. There's a capacity to make money. What we can say is that the best research has been done on people who've got other kinds of conditions. So inpatients in hospitals who've got anxiety or other health problems, or people who've got other social phobias or conditions or depression. The research seems to show that weighted blankets do work best for those people with particular health problems. Whether they work well for healthy adults who've got no problems, the research doesn't yet show. But it certainly works in those groups that have got other clinical problems.
And then if we look at people with diabetes, asthma, sleep apnea, high blood pressure, even like claustrophobia, maybe they're not a good fit for everyone in the end.
Well, at the moment, some of the research that's out there isn't very convincing. It's done with small samples or very biased selected samples. So, as we need with most things, what we need are good randomized controlled trials with a large population base representing all kinds of conditions and health statuses. And then we'd have a good idea at seeing if these blankets work. And if one of these blanket manufacturers want to sponsor that research, everyone's a winner.
Now, zooming out, weighted blankets or not, whether they're a miracle fix for a myriad of problems or not, I think the underlying thing here is like anxiety, relaxation, people wanting better sleep when they can't have it. Do you have any recommendations for improving people's sleep generally that may not be spending $60 on a blanket?
Yeah, occupational psychologists know a lot about sleep hygiene because we want people to be refreshed and feeling well. before I talk about that, one thing I can tell you through my reviews of the research, one thing that weighted blankets has in common with hypnosis. And hypnosis works in about 2/3 of patients. So 2/3 of people who are hypnotized find it works for their problem, whether it's giving up smoking, fear of dentists, wanting to lose weight. The biggest predictor of whether hypnosis will work or not is if the patient believes it can. And I think it's a similar thing with weighted blankets. If you go to bed with an open mind and thinking, well, this could work, it probably will. So if you have open-mindedness for it working, there's a very good chance that a blanket probably will work. But there are other things you can do as well before you spend your money on a blanket. Sleep hygiene. So no screen time for at least an hour, 90 minutes before you go to bed. Avoid all the caffeinated beverages. Avoid any stimulation. Try and obviously have a good wash or a bath or a shower. Wash your face. You can use scents and smells and candles, lilac, obviously lots of other body sprays and bed sprays. You can use joss sticks. You can use air fresheners. Lighting is really important. Mood lighting, muted lighting. Put your phone or your tablet out of your reach. The temptation to lean over and grab your iPhone if you can't sleep means you'll spend an hour doom scrolling. So the odds are on your side. If you treat your bedroom as a sanctuary and a place away from business and a place to relax, you can shape it and model it, and you can make sure you get 8 good quality hours of sleep. We've all got the power to do that.
Craig, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you very much for having me, David.
Craig Jackson is a workplace psychology professor at Birmingham City University. That is a wrap on the show. That is a wrap on the night. Don't forget the Last Show podcast. If you go to our website, www.lastshow.pizza, that is .pizza, not .com, you can find out details, including how to subscribe. I am David Cooper. This was not and was never the first show. We'll be back tomorrow night. Thanks for tuning in.